Hey everybody, what is going on? I am Maximus Rex and this is Big Baby Reviews. Today is Wildcard Sunday where we look at things that are a little bit different from our regularly scheduled videos during the week. Today we're taking a look at Vortex issue number 2, cover dated October 1993, published by Hall of Heroes, independent company from the early 90s, right in the comic book boom. And how else does it relate to the comic book boom? Why am I interested in this issue? Well, I've already reviewed issue number 1 that I found randomly in a dollar bin somewhere, and since then I've been able to find issues 2 and 3 at my comic shop, so at a really decent price too. I don't think these are particularly sought out, and so that's why I'm reviewing issue 2 today, and sometime soon in the future issue number 3. Why am I interested in Vortex? It's that McFarlane aesthetic, right? There's a whole kind of phenomenon back in the early 90s of clones of popular artists, right? So you had like the Rob Liefeld clones, the Jim Lee clones, and of course you had the McFarlane clones, the analogs, whatever you want to call them, who kind of had, some to varying degrees of success. But this is one of the guys that I feel does it pretty well overall. There's still some amateurish aspects to this comic, but it still works. Some of the storytelling is really fun. It's black and white, so you can really look at the inked artwork, which I appreciate. And, he's still pulling off some good stuff. And with the McFarlane aesthetic, if we look at the cover, right away in the composition of the figures and the cape, the big head in the background, I'm sure you can see that McFarlane influence. If you look at the lines that are kind of emanating in the background here, they have a very McFarlane kind of quality, right? The Hobgoblin, when McFarlane drew him, right, or the Green Goblin, you kind of think of that here, just how McFarlane does skulls generally. And I like this one because you can kind of see where he used white medium, right? So that white line there was done as a black line is, right, by some white medium. That's not just white space that he left there. There's a little bit here and there. There's a bit in the hair here. And again, because it's black and white, maybe it's a little easier to pick up, and I like seeing that kind of stuff. Or maybe they didn't play with the levels to the point they should have and adjusted, but it doesn't ruin the artwork, but I appreciate it because you can kind of see a little bit of what's going on behind the scenes. And I would say overall, he's got the McFarlane aesthetic down, right? The kind of hatched lines McFarlane does, this reflective quality he gives this, chest armor here and a little bit here, but mostly here, is very McFarlane-esque. The contour of his lines, right? These little tick lines that he adds, but to me feels just somewhat cleaner and a little more illustrative than McFarlane, right? McFarlane, it almost gives him like more of an underground kind of quality, a little bit of an outsider thing, where here it's a little more controlled in a weird way, like by more of a draftsman. But, I would still say McFarlane overall, his art is stronger in his proportions and stuff, even though they're not perfect. But this guy's doing a really good job at the McFarlane aesthetic, as opposed to other guys who don't do so great. So I'll give you more examples. We'll have a look inside. So art, story, and letters, Matthew Martin. So he does all the comic basically, right? He produces the whole thing. You've got the publisher here, editor. We're not going to go into that, right? So we've already talked about Hall of Heroes being the publisher. So clearly, when you look at this, what he wants to be doing is drawing cool looking, dark 90s superheroes and hot 90s girls, right? Because that's basically what this book consists of. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And I talked about this. This guy was pretty young when he was doing this book. I think he was like 17, 18. So I could see how that would be a lot of what you're preoccupied with at that age, right? So of a similar age to me, I can kind of, I was into comic books and chicks for sure. Didn't tell the girls that I was into comic books. That didn't really usually help you out back then. Today's quite different when it comes to that. But then today it's all about online dating, so I have no idea what that is. Anyways, some very McFarlane elements down here. The broken border, the shifted kind of panel, the way he draws a phone even. For those of you out there who don't know, you youngsters, this is like a wire phone that we used to have that was attached to the wall, right? And this bit of energy and these lines here, definitely a McFarlane kind of look and design here. And yeah, if you look at these pages, what you'll see is these, the vertical panels, the overlapping panels, the use of texture to do border panels here, all very McFarlane-esque. And aesthetically, again, like this is, straight out of Spawn. I also, like the character himself, I guess he's Vortex, right? But you know him as the Vortex. There's my answer. The way he does the cape, like if it's even possible to say it's more overblown than Todd McFarlane and Spawn, I didn't think it's possible, but I do feel like it is. And I feel like he's a great artist. Missed opportunity, right? Here the cape is kind of going over and it doesn't obscure down here too much, so that's fine. But this bit here is within the panel. I guess you know, like I talked in yesterday's review for the Savage Dragon, the layering is what decides what kind of crosses the border and what doesn't. But then, you know, there's some crossing the border here behind this panel, which is cool, creates even more layering. Just feel like that one should have popped out of the panel here as well. Anyways, doesn't ruin it for me. That's a weird kind of tangent to just have the cape finish right at the edge there. But you know, it took me a while to actually look up here and see this extra other bit of cape that he did here. Just amazingly overblown. Would have had the spike here maybe go in front. I don't know. It depends how wide he's trying to establish these horns are. I guess they're horns. So I was going to say, yeah, about the character. There's something, you know, you take Spawn, you take Vortex, and you take Faust, right? And there's just a lot of similarities there. So I definitely feel like this guy here is probably looking at Faust and Spawn. Todd McFarlane's looking at Faust. Don't think he's necessarily looking at this. This came out after, right? Definitely this is a response to Spawn to a certain extent. Always those kind of decorative borders. Sometimes, you know, more evocative, sometimes less. And then boom, he gets a couple of full bleed splash images here. Some interesting insert panels. Now he's again using that same trick from last page, I guess, to layer everything with the cape coming out. Now again, when he draws the ladies, very McFarlane-esque as well. Not quite as successful as the male figures. I think it's when he's drawing the girls that you still kind of see some amateurish aspects to his art. But that's, I've talked about before, definitely some McFarlane hair, right? Just a little more controlled once again. I feel like, you know, you look at this page, very Spawn-like, right? Imagine Angela or something here in Spawn, and, you know, the character's Violator, right? Like, very similar to that, but just a little more amateurish, but also in the finish, a little more controlled, a little slicker, you know, a little more shiny, this character. But then he, you know, there's pages here. He goes, I find he goes in with a little bit of grit here. This is so McFarlane-y. Like, I'm wondering if this is ripped off, swiped from that Spider-Man run. Calypso is her name, I believe, in that first 5 issues with the lizard. She was Craven's girlfriend, right? I feel like maybe this is a little bit ripped off from one of those. Very McFarlane-esque here. Or it was drawn also at a different size and glued in or something. Something weird. The lines seem thinner than the rest of the comic. Cool sequence here. Kind of unfortunate that, like, the angel coming down on this demon here is kind of obscured by his wing. That's definitely something I feel like you would have cut across down so we could see more of his face. It's a weird choice. It just obscures a bit too much of a character we're first being introduced to and who looks kind of cool, but I can't see enough of, right? But later on we will. And you get interesting choice to have like these motion lines kind of come to a point here and then down here in this other direction. So the movement of the angel coming in to stab the demon and I guess the exit wound and the impact that it creates. Another page where we can see some of that white medium he's using every once in a while. Over here. Great to have all that slobber and or blood coming out of his mouth as well. Very cool. Like, this is a cool kind of thing, right? It's the kind of stuff you wanted to see as a kid in these type of comics. Something independent comics can do more so the mainstream comics bring in religious figures. So we got Jesus all of a sudden here getting, you know, kicked down by the Roman soldier here and then going to hell before he resuscitates. This sequence is kind of interesting. I read it because I was curious as to what was going on. And I mean, you know, maybe a little bit more bombastic, but he's not adding that much to the depiction of Jesus here. He's got a nail coming out of his hand because he's been crucified. He's got the crown of thorns. He's got the blood and everything. I would say this is even, you know, more subdued than Mel Gibson's movie, right? The Passion of the Christ. That was a rough one to watch. Now we get a better look at the angels here, fighting the demons off again. And, you know, he's much more of a decorative kind of page layout guy, right? Where it's not, the focus isn't necessarily on storytelling so much, even though there is some sequence to sequence with the bigger images, but it's about the layering and making the whole page interesting. And, you know, both these pages, again, using the same element and have a similar kind of layout to them. That element being this lady here, who's literally in both shots just meant to be sexy. I feel like maybe already he's improving a little bit with his female form here from the previous pages. Sometimes, you know, as you go through some artist comics, you'll see, you know, slow progress on certain things across the whole run. But sometimes within the same comic, you'll see kind of the artist leveling up a little bit. I mean, not much to say about the story. It's, you know, more that 90s shtick. Even the lettering, right, to a certain extent. Doesn't that... Not everywhere. Not when he does it here, but the Stacy here just looks very Todd McFarlane to me. Always interesting power effects and emanations and stuff. He's really good at that, exaggerating the expression here. Again, this page to me is very McFarlane-esque. How do you get through an action sequence very quickly? It's kind of reminiscent of all these panels here. Very reminiscent of kind of McFarlane cropping. That issue that Frank Miller wrote, where all the action of him beating up Spawn, beating up the kind of technologically armed gang happens off screen, right? I think he did it in Spider-Man at some point in some sequence. I can't remember specifically, but I know he did. And there's even, like, you know, Stephen Platt, to a certain extent, when he started out, was a kind of a mix of Rob Liefeld and some McFarlane stuff. So I see certain similarities here and there between these guys. So the way he does the cloth here and the movement and the, you know, original kind of inspiration from the Spawn cape, but then here, you know, he's rounded out the lines much more than McFarlane did. McFarlane was using more kind of angular and triangular shapes. He's rounded stuff off here, and that to me definitely resembles this shot of this girl here is very Stephen Platt to me, and Stephen Platt does similar things. But I mean, he's got interesting ideas for layouts. The hand with the gun here in the foreground I think works really well with the characters here. The extreme kind of foreshortening on the gun. This feels a little weird where, you know, he was inked, Vortex was inked in a much thicker line. I feel like maybe this was meant to be inked in black, kind of the silhouette or something, and he may have forgotten. I don't know. It's just a weird thing there. It's not the end of the world, but I don't know how successful the foreshortening is, but it's pretty extreme, and it works in a storytelling sense at least, right? It's pretty in your face and dynamic. So I'll let that one slide. This vortex effect is interesting, right? I don't think McFarlane would ever do something like that. That's more of a kind of Steranko kind of thing. And even when he does silhouettes here with that McFarlane thing of adding the little bit of halo all the way around to help define the form, right? Anytime I see a skull, the hand here, very McFarlane-esque. But again, if you look at it here, I feel like McFarlane would noodle even more and have more kind of, you know, weak lines. By that I mean kind of broken lines and not clean and slick. I feel like this guy's always just keeping the clean and slick aspect and of adding lots of lines and then just pulling back before McFarlane would. This is a fun page with the tilted kind of panels here. You don't quite have to flip the book to its side so it's not too annoying. Pretty cool, that. The shot of the skull exploding as well. Now this is somewhere where maybe like this Halo McFarlane thing that he does, I feel like this might have worked better if this whole area was blacked out. You don't do the halo, the cross is full silhouette because this is fairly light back here, right? So even more contrast, I think, would have made the skull stand out even more. And also, weird choice, like the back of the skull at some point, I think there are holes that you can see through, so you would have wanted to have seen these lines, and I probably would have blacked out the interior of the skull eye just for contrast, really. It's a cool image, but I feel it's lacking in a little bit of contrast. The other eye here is kind of hard to pick up on. Whereas all these other pages here, there's a pretty good balance as far as the contrast go on this one down here. Very cool. So he's met the Reaper. Vortex has taken his weapon here. It definitely feels like kind of cool images he wants to draw. Which again, I'm not going to fault him. It's his comic, and there's a lot of cool stuff in it. Again, for that 90s vibe, if you're looking for something you haven't read before, looked at, this is the kind of stuff you want to go out searching in the bins for still low prices. Get a bit of your McFarlane fix. That one's very cool. I feel like I've seen this before. Again, maybe some of the stuff is maybe directly swiped from McFarlane. I don't know for sure. But with the character kind of overlapping the panel behind him, I mean, I feel this is lifted from somewhere, but I can't say where. Could be wrong though. Again, a lot of it is McFarlane-esque, so it should evoke some of that stuff, I guess. There you go. I thought this was a weird choice just to take one of the splash pages and present it as a pinup, I guess, at the end of the book. Just, we've already seen the image. Try to give us something else, right? We got some interesting ads here for issue number 3, which, like I said, I'll be reviewing sometime soon in the future. I do have it, so you know, if you're looking forward to that, it's next couple of weeks, I guess. Scourge, who's the other character that was introduced here. Pretty cool pinup. That maybe should have been on the other page, and you throw something else in there. Once again, I think when we did Vortex number 1, I talked about the connection between this guy and Trent Canugia. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong every time. I'll just call him Trent. So Trent, we have a few examples of his comics here as well. So at one time, I guess they were helping each other out with advertising. And it's interesting because, if I can point it out, yeah, so some of the stuff by Trent down here has a slightly more kind of McFarlane bent to it. And then when we see this one here, it's starting to look a little bit more like him. The lines are a little bit more angular, and there's more of maybe like a graffiti kind of influence to it. But yeah, he's another guy. I've got those Creed comics. I found a whole bunch of them, again, in the dollar bins, so I'm going to be looking at those as well as at some point soon on Wildcard Sunday. And there's one last pinup. You know, other than the repeat image, he has given us a lot of pinups near the end of the book, and I certainly do appreciate that. And again, just one last example of the McFarlane style inking. The fire here, dead ringer for how McFarlane does it. The kind of texture of the dirt here inside of this tomb that our point of view that we're in, completely McFarlane-esque. Again, that halo silhouette deal. And this, I would say, is not necessarily McFarlane specific, but I appreciate the fact that he curved that and gave it a bit of, like, there's a sense of a circular kind of perspective there that I think works pretty well. Definitely McFarlane Moon as well. All right, guys, there you go. That is my review of Vortex issue number 2. If you are still watching and you're subscribed, thank you so much. I do appreciate you sticking around. If you're watching but you're not subscribed, please do so below. It really helps out the channel. It helps us grow, and it helps get us out there to other people who are into comic books just like we are. So everyone out there, thanks again, and have an awesome day.
Like! Subscribe! Like! Subscribe!
King Comics presents Big Baby, Volume 1, Issues 1 to 13, 204 pages of story and art. King Comics also presents Star Crasher one-shot, 32 pages, cosmic sci-fi surrealist adventure. You can find these fine comics at KingComics.CA, at MaximusRex13 on Instagram, or on Facebook, MaxRex or Big Baby.